You know that feeling when someone tries to humiliate you publicly, but karma has other plans? Well, let me tell you about the day I was banned from my own brother's wedding, only to end up walking down that aisle anyway. By the time you hear what the priest said that made me smile, you'll understand why sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of justice. My name is Sarah, and this story begins 6 months before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my brother Jake's life. Growing up in suburban Denver, Jake and I were inseparable. We shared everything: childhood adventures in the Rocky Mountain foothills, late-night conversations about our dreams, and even our college years at the University of Colorado. But everything changed when he met Victoria. Victoria Wellington came from old money, the kind that builds wings on hospitals and has streets named after great-grandfathers. She was everything I wasn't: perfectly polished, socially connected, and utterly convinced that the world should revolve around her carefully curated existence. From the moment Jake brought her home to our modest ranch house in Lakewood, I could see the disdain in her eyes as she took in our family photos, my mom's handmade quilts, and the comfortable chaos that defined our home. "Sarah works as a graphic designer," Jake had said proudly during that first dinner, his hand finding mine across the table. "She's incredibly talented. Show her your portfolio, sis." Victoria's smile was razor sharp. "How creative. I'm sure there's a market for that sort of thing." The way she said it made my profession sound like a hobby I'd outgrow. But Jake was head over heels, and I wanted him to be happy. So I bit my tongue through months of subtle insults, backhanded compliments, and watching my brother slowly transform into someone I barely recognized. Gone was the guy who'd spend Saturday mornings hiking with me at Red Rocks, replaced by someone who now preferred wine tastings in Cherry Creek and charity galas, where Victoria could show him off like a prized possession. The engagement announcement came during a family barbecue last summer. My parents were thrilled, and I plastered on a smile as Victoria flashed a diamond that probably cost more than my annual rent. "Sarah, I hope you'll be my maid of honor," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I mean, who else would Jake want but his dear sister? I should have known it was a trap. The wedding planning began immediately, and Victoria's true colors emerged like a toxic rainbow. Every decision had to be perfect. Every detail scrutinized through her lens of what people like us would expect. The venue was the exclusive Broadmoor Resort in Colorado Springs, where the waiting list was longer than most marriages. The guest list read like a who's who of Denver society, while my parents' friends were deemed too common for such an elegant affair. But it was during the dress fitting that things really went sideways. Victoria had insisted on a specific designer, and when I arrived at the boutique in downtown Denver, I found her waiting with a group of her friends, all blonde, all thin, all looking like they'd stepped out of a country club catalog. "Sarah, darling," Victoria cooed as I approached, "we need to talk about your situation." "My situation?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Well, you've put on weight since Jake and I got engaged. The dress just doesn't fit properly anymore." She gestured vaguely at my body, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I'd gained maybe 5 pounds during a stressful period at work, hardly noticeable to anyone but someone looking for flaws. "I'm sure we can make alterations," I said quietly, aware that her friends were watching this exchange like it was entertainment. "Oh, sweetie, no. These dresses are works of art. You can't just adjust them." She paused, pretending to consider her options. "I think it would be best if you stepped down as maid of honor. My cousin Brittany can fill in. She's the perfect size." The boutique fell silent except for the soft jazz playing overhead. I stood there, holding a dress that cost more than my car payment, feeling smaller than I had since high school. But before I could respond, Victoria delivered the final blow. "And honestly, Sarah, maybe it's better this way. You've been so difficult throughout this whole process, always questioning my choices, making suggestions that just don't fit our vision. This wedding is about elegance and sophistication, and I need people around me who understand that." I left the boutique without a word, the expensive dress abandoned on the counter. The drive home through Denver traffic was a blur of tears and rage. How had I let this happen? How had I let someone else's insecurities make me feel so small? That night, I called Jake. "We need to talk," I said, my voice still shaky from the afternoon's humiliation. "Victoria told me what happened," he said before I could explain. "Look, Sarah, I love you, but this is her day. Can't you just try to be supportive?" Supportive? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jake. She humiliated me in front of strangers. She kicked me out of the wedding party because I gained 5 pounds. "She's under a lot of stress," he said, and I realized he was reading from Victoria's script. Planning a wedding is incredibly difficult, and she just wants everything to be perfect. And apparently I'm not perfect enough to be your sister at your wedding. There was a long pause. Sarah, you're always going to be my sister, but Victoria is going to be my wife. I need you to respect that. The conversation ended with both of us angry, and it was the last real conversation we'd have for months. Through mutual friends, I learned that Victoria had convinced Jake that I was toxic and jealous of their relationship. She'd painted me as the bitter single sister who couldn't handle her brother's happiness. The wedding invitations went out in February, and mine never arrived. I found out about it through my parents, who were horrified but felt powerless to intervene. You know how your brother gets when he's made up his mind, my mother said sadly. Maybe after the wedding, things will go back to normal. But I knew better. Victoria had succeeded in driving a wedge between Jake and me, and I was officially persona non grata at the wedding of the century. March arrived with the kind of crisp Colorado spring that makes you remember why you love living here. The aspen trees were just starting to bud, and the mountains were still capped with snow. I'd planned to spend the wedding weekend hiking alone, trying to process the loss of my relationship with my brother. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. I was at my local coffee shop in Capitol Hill, working on a logo design for a new client, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sarah, this is Marcus. We need to talk. Meet me at Cheeseman Park in an hour. It's about Jake's wedding. Marcus Thompson was Jake's best friend since college, a guy I'd always respected but rarely spoke to directly. He was standing by the pavilion when I arrived, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. Sarah, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to promise me you won't do anything reckless with this information. I nodded, curiosity overriding my caution. Jake called me last night. He's having second thoughts about the wedding. My heart stopped. What do you mean? He's realizing what Victoria has cost him. His relationship with you, his friendship with people she deemed unacceptable, even his relationship with your parents. She's systematically isolated him from everyone who really cares about him. Marcus ran his hand through his hair, clearly struggling with what to say next. There's more. I've been friends with Jake for 15 years, and I've never seen him so empty. He's going through the motions, but he's not happy. And yesterday, he admitted that he's been thinking about calling the whole thing off. Then why doesn't he? Because he's terrified. The wedding is tomorrow, there are 300 guests, and Victoria's family has already paid for everything. He feels trapped. I stared across the park at the Denver skyline, processing this information. Marcus, why are you telling me this? Because you're his sister, and he needs you. Whatever happened between you two, whatever Victoria did to drive you apart, Jake needs someone who loves him unconditionally to remind him who he really is. I wasn't even invited to the wedding. Marcus smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Actually, you were. Victoria had your invitation destroyed, but Jake specifically asked me to make sure you were there. He just didn't know how to reach out after everything that happened. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. This is from Jake. He wrote it weeks ago but was too scared to send it. With shaking hands, I opened the letter. Jake's familiar handwriting filled the page. Sarah, I know I've been the worst brother in the world these past months. I let Victoria convince me that you were the problem, when really, I was just scared of losing her. But I've realized that in trying to keep her happy, I've lost everyone who actually matters to me. I don't know how to fix this, but I need you to know that you'll always be my sister, and I'm sorry for everything. I miss you so much it physically hurts. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I'd love for you to be at my wedding. Not because Victoria wants you there, but because I do. I love you, sis. Jake. The tears came then, months of hurt and anger finally finding their release. Marcus put a comforting hand on my shoulder. The wedding is at 3 tomorrow at the Broadmoor. Jake needs to see a friendly face in that crowd, someone who loves him for who he is, not who he's trying to become. I looked up at him through my tears. What if Victoria sees me? Let me worry about Victoria. The drive to Colorado Springs the next morning was surreal. I'd chosen a simple navy dress that made me feel confident without being flashy, and I'd spent extra time on my makeup to cover the evidence of a sleepless night. As I navigated the winding mountain roads, I thought about all the ways this day could go wrong. But Jake's letter was in my purse, and that gave me courage. The Broadmoor was everything I expected, opulent, imposing, and filled with people who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. I slipped into the chapel just as the ceremony was beginning, finding a seat in the back behind a particularly large floral arrangement. From there, I could see Jake at the altar, looking handsome but nervous in his black tuxedo. The processional began, and Victoria's bridesmaids made their way down the aisle in perfect synchronization. Each one looked like they'd been cast for the role, their champagne-colored dresses creating a sea of coordinated elegance. I spotted Brittany, Victoria's cousin, who'd taken my place as maid of honor. She was beautiful, blonde, and thin, everything Victoria had wanted in her wedding party. Then came Victoria herself, resplendent in a dress that probably cost more than my car. She was undeniably beautiful, floating down the aisle like a vision of bridal perfection. But as she approached Jake, I noticed something in his eyes. Not joy, but resignation. He looked like a man walking to his execution rather than his wedding. The ceremony began with the traditional words, but I could barely focus on them. I was watching Jake's face, seeing the conflict written there as clearly as if he'd spoken it aloud. This was wrong, and everyone in that chapel seemed to sense it, except Victoria, who was basking in the attention of her perfect day. Then came the moment that changed everything. If anyone has reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace, the priest intoned. The chapel fell silent, and I felt my heart hammering in my chest. This was it, the moment where someone needed to speak up for Jake, to save him from a mistake that would cost him his soul. But the silence stretched on, and I realized with growing horror that no one was going to say anything. Not Marcus, not my parents, not any of the 300 guests who had to see what I was seeing. I started to stand, my mouth opening to speak, when Jake's voice cut through the silence. I do. But he wasn't answering the priest's question. He was looking directly at me, and I saw a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there moments before. I do have a reason, he said, his voice growing stronger. I can't marry you, Victoria. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. The chapel erupted. Victoria's gasp was audible even over the murmurs of shock from the guests. Jake, what are you saying? I'm saying that I've been pretending to be someone I'm not for the past year, and I can't pretend anymore. I've let you turn me against the people who love me most, and I've compromised everything I believe in to make you happy. But I'm not happy, Victoria. I haven't been happy since the day I let you convince me that my sister wasn't good enough for our wedding. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of 300 stares. Victoria's face was a mask of fury and humiliation. This is about her? She snarled, pointing at me. That pathetic, jealous... Stop, Jake said firmly. Don't you dare talk about my sister that way. Sarah has been nothing but supportive of this relationship, even when you've treated her terribly. She's been more gracious than you deserve, and I've been a fool to let you come between us. Victoria's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. You're going to humiliate me like this? In front of everyone? I'm sorry, Victoria. I really am. But I can't marry someone who makes me choose between them and my family. I can't marry someone who doesn't love me for who I am. The priest, clearly out of his depth, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a moment to... No, Jake said. I'm done taking moments. I'm done pretending. He looked directly at me again. Sarah, I know I have no right to ask this after everything that's happened, but will you walk out of here with me? Will you help me remember who I used to be? I didn't hesitate. I stood up, ignoring the stares and whispers, and walked down that aisle toward my brother. But as I reached the altar, the priest's voice stopped me. Best woman, come up. I turned to him, confused. I'm sorry? The elderly priest smiled kindly. You, my dear, are clearly the best woman here today. You've shown more grace and love than anyone else in this room. If this young man is looking for someone to stand by his side as he makes the right choice, then I'd say you're exactly where you belong. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been banned from this wedding, deemed not good enough to stand beside my brother on his special day. But here I was, walking up to that altar anyway, not as a bridesmaid or maid of honor, but as something more important. His sister, his friend, his reminder of who he really was. Victoria was livid, her face red with rage and embarrassment. This is not how this was supposed to go. You're right, Jake said, taking my hand. This is so much better. We walked out of that chapel together, leaving behind the chaos of overturned expectations and wounded pride. Outside, the Colorado sun was shining, and the mountains looked like they were welcoming us home. I'm sorry, Sarah, Jake said as we stood on the steps of the Broadmoor. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, I said, hugging him tightly. I'm just glad you figured it out before it was too late. What do we do now? He asked, and I realized he was asking about more than just the immediate aftermath of walking out on his wedding. Now we go home, I said, and we remember what really matters. The drive back to Denver was quiet but comfortable, like we were both processing what had just happened. Jake had traded his tuxedo for jeans and a t-shirt from my emergency bag, and he looked more like himself than he had in months. "You know," I said as we wound through the mountain roads, "I never thought I'd be grateful to be banned from a wedding." Jake laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. "Victoria probably thought she was punishing you by keeping you away. Instead, she gave me the perfect seat to watch you find your backbone. I should have found it sooner. You found it when you needed to. That's what matters." We spent the rest of the drive talking about everything and nothing, rebuilding the bridge that Victoria had tried so hard to burn. By the time we reached Denver, it felt like we'd never been apart. The fallout from the wedding was swift and dramatic. Victoria's family was furious, threatening lawsuits and social ruin. The story made the society pages, with headlines like, "Runaway groom leaves bride at altar," and "Society wedding ends in scandal." But Jake didn't care. He'd found something more valuable than social approval. He'd found himself again. 3 months later, Jake moved back to Denver and started working for a nonprofit focused on outdoor education for underprivileged kids. It was a job that paid a fraction of his previous salary, but filled his soul in ways that corporate law never had. He was himself again, the brother I'd grown up with, the man who valued relationships over appearances and authenticity over approval. We started hiking together again, spending Saturday mornings at Red Rocks like we used to. During one of those hikes, as we sat looking out over the Front Range, Jake brought up the wedding. "You know what the craziest part is?" he said. "I spent so much time trying to be good enough for Victoria that I forgot who I actually was. But you never forgot. Even when I was being an idiot, you never stopped believing in the real me." "That's what family does," I said simply. "The priest was right, you know. You were the best woman there that day. Hell, you were the best person there." I smiled, thinking about how Victoria had tried so hard to keep me away from that wedding, only to have me end up exactly where I belonged, standing beside my brother when he needed me most. "Sometimes," I said, "the universe has a twisted sense of justice. Or maybe it just has a sense of humor." As for Victoria, she rebounded quickly, marrying a banker from an even more prominent family within 6 months. According to the society pages, it was everything her first wedding was supposed to be: elegant, exclusive, and utterly without heart. I wished her well, genuinely. She'd taught me something valuable about the difference between wanting to be perfect and wanting to be real. The story of Jake's wedding became family legend, retold at every gathering with new embellishments and details. But for me, the real story wasn't about the drama or the social scandal. It was about the moment when love triumphed over appearances, when authenticity won over artifice, and when a brother and sister found their way back to each other. Sometimes the best weddings are the ones that never happen, and sometimes being banned from the wedding is the best thing that could happen to you. Because in the end, I got exactly what I'd always wanted. My brother back, standing beside me where he belonged, choosing family over facade and love over status. And that's a happy ending worth more than any society wedding could ever be. If this story resonated with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos about real-life drama and family relationships. Drop a like if you believe that sometimes the universe has perfect timing, and share this with someone who needs to remember that family always comes first. What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to check out our other stories about love, betrayal, and the power of standing up for what's right. Until next time, remember, the best relationships are built on authenticity, not appearances.